Welcome back to the Sports Business Leaders Podcast. Today's guest is Sapna Shah. Thanks for joining the show, Sapna.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Sapna Shah is the founder of Red Giraffe Sports, an investment firm focused on women's sports, fan engagement, and community driven sports businesses. After more than a decade investing in retail and consumer startups, Sapna has shifted her focus to sports, building a portfolio that includes investments in Unrivaled Basketball, the New York Cosmos, Break Sports, and other innovative companies shaping the future of the sports industry today. So again, Sapna, welcome to the show. Would love to hear more about your journey, how you got here, and what your work in sports looks like.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat about all of those things. Very much looking forward to the conversation. So thanks again for having me. Um, you're totally right. I've been investing for 13 years. So I've been an investor for a while, but I spent a lot of time before that in the retail and consumer space, working at companies you've probably heard of, like Gap and Linens and Things and Ann Taylor, and being an entrepreneur as well. Um, Switched over to the investing side like I said, 13 years ago, have made a lot of investments. I think I'm at over 25 now and have really recently shifted into sports and looking forward to digging more into the sports side of things today.
Yeah, it's exciting. Can you tell everybody more about your thesis as an investor in sports?
Yeah, I mean, I'm focused on women's sports primarily or mixed gender. So I think everybody's seen the growth of women's sports. Everybody's seen the numbers. There was a McKinsey report just last year, about a year ago, that said, there's this unmonetized $2.5 billion revenue opportunity in women's sports. I think that number is low. I think it's much higher than that, just when you compare women's to men's sports. And we've seen a hockey stick already in women's sports, but I think there's so much more to be done here. So that's generally the first piece of my thesis. The second piece I would say is that the fact that we live in this very kind of polarized community, the world is more polarized. You know, community is harder to find when in kind of this post COVID, post pandemic world. People are much more behind screens and they're not getting out to, like when I grew up in the 80s, you went to the mall and that's where you hung out with your friends. That kind of thing doesn't happen as much anymore. So I think sports is the one place that we all come together as a community and as a fandom, whether that's watching live, whether that's in the arena on TV, whether you're hosting a party, whether you're just wearing, like in this case, this week, everybody in New York is wearing a Knicks jersey. You're part of something bigger. And I think from a societal perspective, I really like that about sports. And I think sports and live events are the kind of the two things that can give you that feeling of community that I think we need as a society. So while I'm a financial investor, I think that community piece is really important to me as well.
100%. And that's a big part of the reason that Jake and I started Sports Business Leaders. So we couldn't agree more with what you said. And just going back to your mention about women's sports particular, how a lot of the big women's sports leagues like the WNBA are only about 30 years old compared to the NFL or MLB, which are a lot of times over 100 years old. So I totally agree. And we've seen a lot of this growth as well, just that you're seeing a lot of these hockey stick growth patterns in women's sports, just like Unrivaled Basketball, and I didn't personally attend the game when it was in Philly, but I know Jake was there and he had a great time, and so we really believe in it, and so would love to hear just what specifically led you to focus on investing in sports, and maybe a little bit more about why in particular women's sports outside of what you just said.
Sure. So I've been a lifelong sports fan. I grew up in Baltimore, so I was a big Baltimore Orioles fan. Big Orioles fan. Would listen if I couldn't watch the games on TV, I'd listen to them on the radio. That level of ridiculous fandom. So really started out my life kind of with the Baltimore Orioles, and then my family, my especially my dad was a huge tennis fan. So grew up kind of watching tennis and playing tennis. And it kind of has snowballed from there. I have never been an athlete. I played varsity tennis in high school, but I was never college level. So I'm not an athlete. If you saw me in person, you'd realize that I'm also not very tall. So things like basketball were not in my future. But I've continued my fandom. So I've starting in college, I really got into um, women's college basketball, and then the WNBA. I've become a big F1 fan. I'm now becoming a big soccer fan. particularly because of my investment in the Cosmos, but also with the World Cup going on right now. Obviously, soccer is on everyone's mind. So, I've just been a fan for a long time. And a couple of years ago, as I was kind of winding down my investing in retail and consumer, and that's a whole nother podcast to talk about what was happening in retail and consumer at the time. But as I was winding it down, I saw this opportunity in women's sports, and it very much aligned with kind of my passion, which is that I care very deeply about pay equity um, for women. And I would see it in tennis in particular, which is one of the most equitable sports for women, is there still isn't full pay equity. And it's something that I'd been, harping on and talking to my family about and my friends about. And yet here's another example of people who are not getting paid what their athletes not getting paid what they're worth. And, there was just this aha moment of like, wait, I should be putting my money where my mouth is. If I care so deeply in this, I should be investing in women's sports. And so that was really the pivot point for me about 2 years ago. So from a personal perspective, it's a passion. I saw what was happening in the industry. I care a lot about pay equity. I care a lot about the community side of things. It just made total sense that this would be where I was going to spend kind of my next however many years focusing my investments on.
Yeah, and a lot of times as a startup founder, people don't always realize that investors are also people that have their own personal interests. And so it's great to hear your background and just what in particular interests you. And it makes sense that you've been interested in investing in women's sports. And so just in that same light, given the fact that a lot of the sports business leaders community is on the startup side of things and they're building companies and they're founders. So what advice when you're evaluating a startup, specifically like a startup team or league, can you talk about what might separate an opportunity that you would invest in versus one that you might want to pass on?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think for probably every investor, this is slightly a different calculation. But I kind of look at multiple factors kind of in a constellation of a few topics. So first and foremost, I look at kind of the leadership team, the whether it's the founders, whether it's like the CEO, kind of the sort of the top leaders of the team, really understanding their backgrounds, but their why of why they're doing it. Like what are they passionate about this? Do they have experience, for example, running a soccer team? Have they been playing soccer since they were 5 years old and know everything there is to know about every team in the MLS or the USL or whatever that is. Um, so that's kind of the first thing I look at. Great example of this is I invested in the reboot of World Team Tennis, which is a tennis exhibition league that involves professional players, and it's launching in December. The press release just came out this past month. The CEO Steven was exactly the right person. Had every kind of contact, played professional tennis, is married to a professional tennis player, knows everybody in the industry, knows what the players want, knows what fans are looking for, really kind of had all those right skill sets, right? And had a team around him. So I think that's kind of thing number one is sort of who is the team. I think second for me is the fan perspective. Not just, I think a lot of teams and leagues tell you how many fans are in the area. And that is sort of not enough, right? It's will fans engage with this brand? Do they already know it? Do people have already heard of the New York Cosmos, right? So, or is it a new brand like Unrivaled Basketball where you have to teach people what it is, right? Either way, do they have a plan for like the brand, the marketing? Like this isn't anymore a build it and they will come. Like you really have to get just like you would in a consumer product, you have to get customer acquisition, right? You have to get fans on board. And so what is their plan to do that? How good are they at doing that? Because you're not just competing with maybe other teams in your local area, you're competing with restaurants, movies, Netflix, you know, concerts, festivals, you're competing with sitting home and doing nothing, right? You're competing with a lot of things as a team or a league. So I think that piece of it is really important. Like how do you engage the fans and how do you get fans? How do you build a fan base and this hopefully a loyal and rabid fan base? And then third, and this one is really critical and very specific to sports, is where is the team playing? So so much of sports investments involve real estate. And sometimes that's renovating or refurbishing an existing arena or stadium. Sometimes it's we need to find a stadium or we need to build one, right? For me in particular, if if there is already an arena or a stadium or a not very not very expensive plan to make that happen. That's really important because, when you suddenly also need another 100 million bucks to put into a facility, like, I'm not that investor, like, I'm not a billionaire. I can't do that. So, for me, like, that would be something where I would pass on something because it's too much focused on the real estate and it requires just too big of a check. So those are kind of the 3 things I look at. Now, obviously, like, is it in women's sports? Do I feel like we could build a community here? Some of the things I've previously said, but those are kind of how I make my pass fail decisions for leagues and teams.
I just wanted to double tap on a point you made earlier, and I actually just recently wrote a LinkedIn post about this 2 days ago, just about deep industry expertise and specifically, and I know we're talking specifically about with the teams and league side of things, but this particular startup that I wrote about was Teamworks, and a big part of the reason why they actually succeeded was one of the founders in particular. He was a offensive lineman at Duke, and he experienced that problem firsthand of having disconnected systems and communication with academic advisors and other coaches and so forth. And so I just wanted to reiterate that fact that it's so important for somebody that's investing in a team or a startup that the founder has that deep experience and expertise so that they really not only have the network, but also have the understanding of how to get stuff done.
Yeah, for sure. Couldn't agree more.
So, as I'm sure you've seen hundreds and maybe even thousands of opportunities to invest in, can you maybe identify what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making when they're pitching investors? And also, what might make a pitch stand out to you?
Sure. Another great question. I think pitching to investors is really hard. I've done it. It's not easy, and it feels very much for founders like any critique you get is, criticizing this thing that you've built. It feels very personal. And so one way to avoid some of those kind of hard moments is to really craft a great pitch, right? And so a lot of times what I see the kind of the 2 biggest mistakes founders make in pitching is the first one is they focus too much on the product or what they're building and where they are in the process of building it. And that's really important. Like, you have to know what it is and you got to know that the person can build it. But what they forget sometimes is that there's a bigger vision here, right? The investor is not investing in the product today. The investor knows that things are going to grow and change, whether that's a league, whether that's a tech product, whether that's a physical product. The world is going to change. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. So, what's kind of the vision for 5 years from now? And how do you take today's product or where you are in the process and amplify it to be like, and this is how we're going to get to this bigger vision 5 years down the road that will have kind of X benchmarks, whether they're metrics, whether they're, you know, wins, whether it's, promotion or relegation in a league, whatever those things are. Um, Really having that combination of here's where we are today, but here's where we're going. And I see a lot of founders make that mistake. They either focus way too much on the where we're going, but we don't know where they are today, or vice versa. So kind of really knowing that having both of those pieces is really important. And then the second thing, and this is one I see almost in every pitch deck, and is usually the first question I ask a founder, um, is how are you going to acquire customers or fans? Whether those customers are individuals, whether they are like B2B and corporates, whether they are fans, whether they're players, right? Whatever, depending on your particular startup, um, really having that detailed understanding of how I'm going to get there and what have I already done to get there. Have I created a waiting list of 50,000 emails? Do I have a community on Instagram that's incredibly active and comments a lot and likes things? Um, do do I have I done consumer research? Have I talked to a lot of people and said, is this something that would be interesting to you? Instead of just sort of having a list of, we're going to do email marketing, we're going to do paid social, and we're going to do influencers. Like, every deck has that, but that's not enough. Again, you can build it, but if they don't come and you don't have a plan to get them, it's not going to work. So, those are kind of the 2 biggest things I find that are generally mistakes in pitches. And they're usually if those mistakes are there, those are the first questions an investor is going to ask. So I would say really focus on those two things. And what makes pitches stand out is obviously clear about the vision and then how they're going to get there with some form of customer acquisition, but also the pitches where the founder's expertise and passion come out are really the ones that stand out, where the person has such a deep knowledge, to your example about teamworks, really has a deep knowledge, really understands the pain point, really passionate about solving it, cannot imagine doing anything else in the world but solving this problem or building this product or launching this league. Like, this is all they want to do. And I think those pitches come out, they really stand out. Whereas a lot of times I think, you know, maybe you're still working in a full-time job because it's too early to quit, um, to work on this new thing full time. That's okay. But if you're still thinking about your full-time job while you're pitching to an investor, your passion's not coming out, right? So that I think is the critical element for really having just a great pitch.
Yeah, this is all great. And one of the biggest things that I took away from what you just said there is a lot of times in going from 0 to 1, startup founders don't always realize that they can create traction either by creating a community or building a big social media page. And it's not like you have to raise money before you do that. And there's tons and tons of ways to creatively validate your idea before you do raise even money. And just going back to the company with Teamworks, I know that they went about 8 years without even raising significant capital. They just did it by having a great concept and doing a great enough job where the coaches and athletic directors would talk to each other and recommend the company. Um,
Right.
so I think that's something that I just wanted to reiterate, and with sports business leaders, it's historically been our biggest focus has been on helping companies either know how to raise capital or go from 0 to 1, but what's really interesting about talking with you is that while we still do a lot of that, we're also starting to help a lot of companies just know how to do business with teams and leagues, and I think that's another cool thing that you have a perspective on is just that you as an investor have a deep understanding of what a lot of these organizations are doing. So I'm sure you might have some additional thoughts there on what a company can do, maybe outside of just the investment world when it comes to doing business with a team and league.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is such a that's like a again a topic, a whole nother topic for a podcast. But what I will say is that I think I think one of the mistakes that sometimes, like, a lot of the sports tech founders make is they go to the big name teams first and in MLB, NFL, but really your proof of concept and some of the smaller teams might actually help you because you'll get more feedback from more senior people on your product. They might have a stronger need because they can't hire as many people because they're in the USL instead of the MLS or whatever. So I think that this is honestly true outside of sports too. Like, if you have a tech product, you don't go, you don't go pitch it to, like, Amazon first, right? You start with kind of smaller companies and you refine and hone and get there, until you've really built the product that fits those larger enterprise organizations. So it's the same concept. Um, I think it's really hard to I think to sell into any large organization because there are so many layers of approval and who can sign a which kind of check and do you need to get IT involved and do you need to get this person involved and then marketing um and so that can be like such a long process that maybe starting a little smaller and really getting a lot of proof of concept and then to your point about the teamworks, see if you get more of those word of mouth referrals, which can make that process a lot easier.
Yeah, 100%, and before I worked on Sports Business Leaders with Jake, I had a company that I modeled a lot of what I did after Teamworks, and it was an app for football coaches, and, that was the thing that I was trying to go after was just getting referrals between football coaches, so appreciate you reiterating that fact is just that it's so important to just a lot of times let your product do the speaking and do the marketing. So yeah, that's great, Sapna, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. So I think I have a pretty good understanding for what your answer might be for the last question here, but Looking ahead over the next 5 to 10 years, where do you believe the biggest investment opportunities in sports will emerge? And what trends are you paying the closest attention to right now?
I mean, I feel like I'm just beating a dead horse here, but really women's sports. We're just not that is literally the number one opportunity, I would say. We're still so underpenetrated. I can't imagine within 10 years we're gonna get to the point of leagues that have been around for 100 years, right? There's still so much room to grow. Um, but when I zoom in a little bit and just think about the US for a moment, I think we're still gonna see a lot of growth in soccer in the US. I think that there's still a lot more to be done in soccer. If you look at other countries who, in fairness, don't have something like the NFL as 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 sort of a big league that takes up a lot of oxygen. But we are also a very large country of 330 million people. So there we're seeing soccer grow in the US. I think both men's and women's we're seeing grow. I think World Cup helps. I think the Olympics will help in 2028. And so I really see the next 5 to 10 years as being really pivotal for an increase in expansion in soccer teams, um, youth soccer, kind of soccer all around. So I still think that there's still more to do there. I'm still looking at soccer opportunities because I believe that that is going to be the case. So I think soccer is one to look at. And then one that I haven't made any investments in is youth sports. We've already seen this huge uptick in startups looking to address all the difficulties around youth sports, like the scheduling and the travel management and communicating to parents and all this stuff. Um, but even facilities and creating pathways to professional that maybe aren't through college, right? Um, Especially in not some of the big sports, right? Not just like football and soccer and baseball, but like youth sports in girls, right? So I think there's still a lot of opportunity there. It's a space I've been looking at, but haven't actually made an investment in. Um, and then kind of getting back to something we briefly mentioned at the beginning is I think there's a lot more to do kind of on the tech side, particularly in fan engagement, but also back office operations, training and fitness and health and wellness, all of that. We've already seen a boom in startups addressing these things, and I hate to bring in AI into this, but with the growth of I think there's a lot more that's going to happen there. That's not a space that I invest in. It is a space that I happen to see a lot in because people do send me those pitches. And it is really interesting to see the kinds of things we can make more efficient. Or even statistically, we can make the stats better and the data better. So I think there's a lot more on the tech side as well that's going to happen. So those are the things I'm looking at least for the next kind of 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree too. We see a lot of obviously tech companies and early stage leagues and teams within sports business leaders. So a lot of the trends that you're seeing, we're also seeing as well. So appreciate you sharing that, Sapna. And just to finish up the conversation here, we'd love to hear if you have any, and you've mentioned so many great pieces of advice, but if there's anything else that comes to mind in addition to what you've talked about for sports entrepreneurs that are in in the fundraising cycle of their business.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think particularly early stage fundraising is maybe the hardest thing you'll do. It's really about casting a very wide net. Kind of what we talked about before. Sports is really personal, and so I'm much more likely to look at a pitch about tennis, for example, than rugby because I don't know anything about rugby. I've only ever seen rugby in the Olympics, and that was only because of Alona Mar, right? So that you don't know what people's passion is and what sports they're interested in, or even if they are a sports, very sports focused investor, depending on the kind of thing you're raising for, but really passing that wide net and because you get a lot of really interesting. I think there's a lot of really interesting investors in the sports space, particularly for teams and leagues, because people are very passionate about a particular sport, and they might not really invest in a lot of things, but they might invest in this because it's something sports related that really just strikes their fancy. And on the tech side, I would say casting a wide net is really important because there are a lot of tech products out there, and um, and a lot, and you don't need to focus just on sports tech investors, but tech investors as a whole. So there's a wide world out there to reach out to, and casting a wide net is your best hope of finding the right investors.
Absolutely, Sapna. Really appreciate all this. Thanks again for being on the show today. And it was great meeting you in person not too long ago in New York City. What would be the best way for the sports business leaders audience to keep in touch with you and follow along with your journey?
Sure, I think the easiest way is my LinkedIn, which is Sapna Shah. You can look me up, or my website, which is called web redgiraffesports.com. Um, and on that website there's like a contact form for if you want to submit a pitch. There's also a lot of resources and events and things like that that I recommend, um, newsletters to read, things like that, both in the retail and consumer space as well as the sports space.
Amazing. Sapna, thank you again for joining the show. Best of luck and excited to keep in touch.
Thanks for having me. This was great.